Nobody quite knows which drink it is that takes him over the edge of being merely a social or hearty, laughing drinker into a morose and hungover, wretched creature who shakes and creaks and sweats and has nightmares, and it's always November and it's raining and it's 3 o'clock in the morning. And
what happens when the bottle becomes more powerful than fame? This is 20 Worst Celebs Who Drank Themselves to Death. A countdown of stars who had it all but couldn't let go of the drink. From Hollywood legends to rock gods and sports heroes, these are the tragic stories of lives cut short by alcohol. No fluff, just raw truth. Some died young, others faded slowly, but all left behind a warning. Stick with us, because each name reveals just how deadly the spotlight can be when the bar stays open and the pain stays hidden. Let's get into it. Errol Flynn, Hollywood's original wild child. Long before TMZ or viral scandals, Errol Flynn was the scandal. With his sword in one hand and a drink in the other, he cut through Hollywood like a hurricane. He made The Adventures of Robin Hood iconic, but it was his off-screen chaos that turned him into a legend. He drank like he was chasing something he couldn't name. Maybe it was peace, maybe it was power, or maybe, like he once said, it isn't what they say about you, it's what they whisper. Flynn drank hard, lived fast, and aged quickly. By his 40s, his once dashing face had gone puffy, his energy cracked by alcohol. He wasn't just partying, he was falling apart. Courtroom scandals, failing health, and a string of women kept him in the headlines. But behind the scenes, he was drowning. Doctors warned him to stop. He didn't. He couldn't. He died in 1959 at the age of 50 from a massive heart attack. The autopsy found cirrhosis of the liver, a swollen heart, and years of abuse written across his organs. His body had given out, but Errol had been gone long before that. And as Hollywood moved on to newer heroes, Flynn became the blueprint for the self-destructive leading man, a pattern that would repeat again and again. Richard Burton, the Shakespearean star who drowned in booze. Richard Burton had a voice like thunder and eyes that could stop time. But behind the Shakespearean grandeur was a man drowning in alcohol and heartbreak. He called booze the great man's disease, and he drank like he was trying to silence the world. From Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf to Cleopatra, he was a force. His love affair and frequent marriage with Elizabeth Taylor was as famous as his acting. But their passion burned hot and toxic, fueled by gallons of liquor and endless arguments. On movie sets, he was often drunk before lunch. Sometimes he didn't even remember filming. Doctors warned him. Taylor begged him. But Burton once said, "I have to think twice before I drink, if I want to stay alive." And eventually, he stopped thinking at all. In 1984, at just 58, Richard Burton died from a cerebral hemorrhage. Decades of alcohol had ravaged his body. His liver was shot. His heart struggled. His mind had dimmed. He died with 9 siblings, 2 Oscars he never collected, and a legacy that felt more like a cautionary tale than a celebration. And Hollywood lost one of its greatest and most broken voices. But if Richard's fall was poetic, the next story is pure chaos. W.C. Fields, comedy's drunken mastermind, W.C. Fields made the world laugh with a glass in his hand and a sneer on his face. In It's a Gift and My Little Chickadee, he turned the drunk into an art form. But what started as an act quickly became a lifestyle. "I never drink water," he joked, "because of the disgusting things fish do in it." But the truth was less funny. Fields had been drinking heavily since vaudeville days. Gin was his medicine for everything: nerves, headaches, even breakfast. On set, he carried a flask. Off set, it was worse. He drank alone, in silence, in secret. By the 1940s, his health was failing fast. He had stomach ulcers, tremors, and internal bleeding. Studios still wanted his humor, but his body was quitting on him. In 1946, he died from a stomach hemorrhage directly caused by alcohol. He was 66. They called it the end of an era, but it was also a warning. The funniest people, they often carry the heaviest pain. And sometimes, laughter is just a cover for slow self-destruction. The next man didn't cover anything. He drank openly, proudly, and it killed him right in the middle of a performance. Oliver Reed, the beast of British cinema. Oliver Reed was a beast, not just on screen, but in every bar he walked into. He was terrifying, magnetic, and completely unpredictable. He gave powerful performances in Gladiator, Women in Love, and Oliver. But his wild drinking made headlines long after the credits rolled. Reed didn't care what people thought. "My only regret is that I didn't drink every pub dry and sleep with every woman on earth," he once boasted. He fought sailors, downed entire bottles of rum in one sitting, and bragged about drinking 100 pints in 2 days. He was more legend than man. But legends still bleed. While filming Gladiator in Malta, Reed walked into a bar and started drinking with a group of British sailors. He challenged them to arm wrestling matches. He drank more, then more. He collapsed mid-binge and died of a heart attack. He was 61. Reed didn't just drink himself to death. He did it on his own terms, in public, in full view of the world. And his death was written into the film's finale, a final reminder of how far talent can fall. But not every artist dies laughing. Some fade slowly, alone, bitter, and drowned in their own legacy. Just ask Truman Capote. Truman Capote, genius destroyed by gin. Truman Capote was sharp, witty, and once-in-a-lifetime brilliant. Breakfast at Tiffany's made him a literary darling. In Cold Blood made him a literary titan. But the higher he climbed, the harder he crashed. He once said, "Life is a moderately good play with a badly written third act." And he lived that third act in a haze of vodka, pills, and public humiliation. Capote loved being the center of attention. He threw lavish parties, mingled with celebrities, and became a household name. But he was always fighting demons, childhood trauma, rejection, and a gnawing need to feel important. Alcohol became his constant companion. His talk show appearances turned into train wrecks. He slurred his words, forgot where he was, and lashed out at friends. He tried to write again, but his mind wasn't sharp anymore. It was soaked. In 1984, at just 59, Capote died from liver disease complicated by alcoholism. He spent his final years floating between houses, burned bridges, and empty bottles. The man who once captivated the world with words couldn't even finish his last book. And with that, another voice dimmed, not in rage, but in slow, quiet decay. John Barrymore, the first fallen idol. Before Hollywood learned how to protect its stars, if it ever really did, John Barrymore was already burning out under the pressure. He wasn't just a star, he was the star. A Shakespearean powerhouse turned silent film icon. He was known as the Great Profile. But behind the scenes, that face was slowly collapsing into a glass. Barrymore brought depth, charm, and gravity to classics like Grand Hotel and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. But he drank like it was part of the script. Brandy, gin, scotch. He once said, "A man is not old until regrets take the place of dreams." And he had a lot to regret. He drank during rehearsals, drank during filming, drank until he couldn't remember his own lines. Friends tried to intervene. Studios pleaded with him. But he couldn't, or wouldn't, stop. Alcohol wasn't just a vice. It was his escape. Eventually, his body began to fail. He collapsed during performances. His once brilliant memory faltered. His charm turned into slurred rants. And in 1942, at the age of 60, he died from kidney failure and cirrhosis of the liver. He left behind a famous family, Lionel Barrymore, Ethel, and eventually granddaughter Drew. But his legacy was more than bloodline. John Barrymore was Hollywood's first true cautionary tale, proof that talent alone isn't enough to survive the fame machine. And where he pioneered the fall, others would tragically follow, some faster than anyone ever expected. Amy Winehouse, the modern-day blues tragedy. Amy Winehouse didn't just sing the blues, she lived them. With a voice like smoke and heartbreak, she poured her soul into Back to Black, giving the world hits like Rehab and You Know I'm No Good. But it wasn't just music. It was prophecy. Fame came fast. Too fast. She was chased by cameras, scrutinized by tabloids, and followed everywhere she went, except into the depths of her addiction. After finally stepping away from drugs, Amy turned to something even more accessible: alcohol. She said once, "I don't think your ability to fight has anything to do with how big you are. It's what's inside of you." But inside, Amy was crumbling. She canceled concerts, stumbled on stage. Her voice, once raw and pure, shook under the weight of withdrawal and intoxication. Fans begged her to stop. So did her family. But addiction doesn't bargain. On July 23, 2011, Amy was found alone in her London flat. Empty bottles surrounded her. The coroner ruled her cause of death as alcohol poisoning. She was 27. She joined the infamous 27 Club, artists who burned out at the same young age. Her story became legend, but her pain remained real. And as her voice echoed through speakers worldwide, we were left asking, how many more? Foster Brooks, the drunk act that became reality. Foster Brooks made a career out of pretending to be drunk. He was the lovable, slurring, stumbling comic who could steal a scene with a single hiccup. Audiences laughed. Producers clapped. And behind the scenes, the line between act and addiction blurred beyond. Recognition. He'd appear on The Dean Martin Show, award shows, and countless roasts, always in character, always with a fake drink in hand. But it wasn't all performance. Brooks had battled real alcoholism for years. He once said, "I quit drinking and smoking the same day. It was the worst 15 minutes of my life." Eventually, the joke became his reality. The fake tipsiness faded, replaced by real health issues caused by years of abuse. Liver problems, heart complications, breathing issues. His charm remained, but his body was paying the price. He faded from the spotlight, quietly retreating from Hollywood. But the damage lingered. Brooks died in 2001 at the age of 89, his organs worn down by decades of real and pretend drinking. He was funny, yes, but he was also a reminder that hiding behind humor doesn't make the pain go away, especially when the bottle is always waiting backstage. And while he died quietly, the next man went out with a quote that would become legendary. Dylan Thomas, the poet who drank himself to death. "I've had 18 straight whiskeys. I think that's the record." That's what Dylan Thomas reportedly said before collapsing in a New York bar. A poet of wild brilliance and deeper demons, Thomas lived like every word he wrote, loud, chaotic, and soaked in liquor. Known for works like Do Not Go Gentle, Into That Good Night, Thomas was a literary rock star before the term existed. He toured constantly, speaking poetry and draining drinks in equal measure. His Welsh charm and lyrical genius masked a self-destructive streak that grew stronger with every toast. He drank to celebrate. He drank to mourn. He drank to forget and to remember. And eventually, it caught up with him. In 1953, during a reading tour in New York, he collapsed after several drinking binges. He was rushed to the hospital, but it was too late. He died at just 39. The autopsy cited pneumonia, swelling of the brain, and liver failure. But everyone knew the real cause. Dylan drank himself out of this world and into literary legend. He asked not to go gentle, but alcohol made sure he left far too soon. And the next name? He ran faster, played harder, but never outran the bottle either. George Best, the soccer star who lost to booze. George Best wasn't just a footballer. He was the footballer. With dazzling footwork, boyish charm, and rock star swagger, he made Manchester United and Northern Ireland proud. But George himself once said it best: "I spent a lot of money on booze, birds, and fast cars. The rest, I just squandered." He had it all, but none of it could save him from himself. As his career soared, so did his drinking. Late nights turned into lost days. His relationships crumbled. His liver began to fail. At just 37, he was already in serious health trouble. Still, he kept drinking. In 2002, he received a liver transplant. Doctors warned him this was a second chance. He thanked them and picked up another drink. In 2005, he was hospitalized with multiple organ failure. The man who once sprinted down soccer fields was now clinging to life in a hospital bed. He died at 59. The newspapers called it a waste. But George Best was more than that. He was a man crushed by expectation, addicted to chaos, and adored even in destruction. And as we move deeper into this list, the stories don't get any softer, only more tragic. Billie Holiday, the voice that couldn't escape pain. When Billie Holiday sang, the world stopped. Her voice could melt steel and break hearts. Strange Fruit wasn't just a song, it was a cry against injustice, a sound so haunting it echoed through history. But the woman behind that voice was running from pain she could never quite leave behind. Born into poverty, abused, and thrust into a world that constantly tried to erase her, Billie found escape in music, and later, in the bottle. She once said, "If I'm going to sing like someone else, then I don't need to sing at all." But as the years wore on, alcohol became her only duet partner. She drank to forget. She drank to numb the racism, the heartbreak, the loneliness. Her personal life crumbled. Her health followed. Her liver was failing, her body swollen, her spirit worn down. In 1959, at just 44, she was admitted to the hospital in terrible condition. And even then, the police came. They handcuffed her to the bed, arrested her for narcotics, and let her die chained, with only $10 in the bank and just a few fans still watching. Billie Holiday didn't just die of cirrhosis. She died of heartbreak, of a world that took everything and gave her just a little fame in return. And from one tortured performer to another, next came a star who hid his sadness behind a smile. Freddie Prinze, the star who hid his pain behind laughs. Freddie Prinze was the king of sitcoms in the 1970s. He starred in Chico and the Man and was hailed as the next big thing in comedy. Charming, magnetic, and barely out of his teens, he seemed to have the world in his hands. But behind the laughter, he was collapsing inside. Freddie battled deep depression that fame only made worse. He leaned on drugs, on alcohol, and on the belief that success would fix everything. But it didn't. As the cameras rolled, he slipped further into the darkness. "It's not easy being famous," he once admitted, "especially when you're sad." At just 22, overwhelmed by anxiety and failed relationships, he put a gun to his head and pulled the trigger. He was under the influence of Quaaludes and alcohol when he died, his dreams shattered on a bedroom floor. The loss stunned Hollywood, a rising star, gone before he could truly shine. And while some deaths come slowly, Freddie's came like a lightning strike, sudden, shocking, and far too soon. But others, like the next name on our list, simmer for years until the body finally gives up. Rik Mayall, the wild comedy legend. Rik Mayall was chaos personified. From The Young Ones to Bottom, his comedy was electric, loud, physical, absurd, and unforgettable. He was a man who seemed indestructible, hurling himself into scenes like a tornado in a wig. But the wildness on screen wasn't just acting. It was real, and it came with a price. Rik was known for his intense energy, but few knew how hard he partied off-screen. He drank heavily, especially in his early career. Those years of excess took a toll on his body, even after he mellowed out in later life. He suffered a near-fatal quad bike accident in 1998 and miraculously survived, but his heart would never fully recover. He once joked, "I am a naturally funny guy, and I drink to keep it from becoming overwhelming." But the truth was, the years of heavy drinking were catching up. In 2014, at the age of 56, Rick Mayall died from a sudden heart attack. While the official reports listed it as natural causes, those close to him knew his body had been through war, and alcohol had been one of his oldest enemies. From one explosive performer to another, we move next to a legend whose struggles were masked by music and nostalgia. Judy Garland, Over the Rainbow, Over the Edge. She was Dorothy Gale, the girl who made us believe in somewhere over the rainbow. But Judy Garland's real life was more storm than sunshine. Fame found her young and never let go. Hollywood gave her pills to stay awake, pills to sleep, and studios that only loved her when she performed. She drank to manage the pressure. She drank to numb the pain. And as the years passed, her drinking grew worse. "I can live without money," she once said, "but I cannot live without love." And sadly, love was often missing. Judy's performances remained powerful, but her body was weakening. She collapsed on stage. She forgot lyrics. And yet, she kept pushing forward, chasing that next applause. In 1969, at just 47, she died in a London bathroom from an overdose of barbiturates. But her liver, already damaged by years of alcohol abuse, couldn't have held out much longer anyway. Her death was officially ruled accidental, but her life had been on a fatal path for years. And as the world mourned Dorothy, it quietly acknowledged the toll of turning a child into a product. From a movie icon, we turn now to a sports icon who lived as loudly as he played, and drank even louder. Babe Ruth, the Sultan of Swat and Scotch. Babe Ruth wasn't just a baseball player. He was baseball. With a bat in his hand and swagger in his stride, he rewrote the record books and redefined American fame. But while he was knocking balls out of Yankee Stadium, he was also knocking back booze, like it was part of his training. Ruth was larger than life, in size, talent, and appetite. He drank before games, after games, and during nights that stretched until sunrise. He once said, "I swing big, I drink big, I live big." And he wasn't lying. He smoked cigars by the dozen, drank until he blacked out. And though his body was strong for a time, the damage was mounting. In his later years, his health fell apart. His weight ballooned, his voice weakened, and in 1948, he died from throat cancer, made worse by years of alcohol and tobacco abuse. He was only 53. The Babe was buried with a rosary and his baseball cap, an American hero to the end. But behind the home runs and headlines was a man who couldn't slow down. And in the end, the cheers faded, but the damage didn't. And next, we meet a woman who once turned heads on screen, and later served drinks to strangers. Veronica Lake, Hollywood's lost bombshell. In the 1940s, Veronica Lake was a vision. With her signature peekaboo hairstyle and icy allure, she lit up the screen in Sullivan's Travels and This Gun for Hire. But fame is a flame, and for Veronica, it burned out fast and left her in the cold. As her popularity faded, so did her career opportunities. Personal tragedies piled up, divorces, custody battles, and financial ruin. To cope, she drank. A lot. She once said, "You could put all the talent I had into your left eye and still not suffer from impaired vision." But her downfall wasn't talent. It was the bottle. By the 1960s, she was no longer a starlet. She was a barmaid in New York, pouring drinks instead of starring in movies. Her health collapsed soon after. In 1973, she died of hepatitis and kidney failure, brought on by years of alcohol abuse. She was only 50. And so the glamorous blonde who once stopped traffic disappeared from the world with barely a whisper. Next came a man who swung for the fences and couldn't outrun what was waiting in his liver. Mickey Mantle, the baseball god who fell to drinking. Mickey Mantle was built for greatness. A New York Yankees legend, he smashed 536 home runs and won 7 World Series titles. But with every win came another drink, and he was drinking long before the cameras ever caught on. Mantle admitted it himself. "If I knew I was going to live this long, I'd have taken better care of myself." He drank in celebration, drank through the pain, drank to forget all he didn't say. And for decades, his addiction stayed hidden beneath the roar of the crowd. In the 90s, his body finally gave out. He underwent a liver transplant, but the damage was already done. In 1995, at 63, he died of liver cancer, the final strike after years of alcoholism. Mantle's fall was heartbreaking. The golden boy of baseball, reduced by a disease that doesn't care how many home runs you've hit. And the next man? He hit with a pen, not a bat. But his punches were just as powerful. Ernest Hemingway, the legendary writer with a broken spirit. Ernest Hemingway wrote like he lived, bold, brutal, and unforgiving. From The Old Man and the Sea to A Farewell to Arms, his words shaped literature. But his inner life was darker than any war story. Hemingway drank constantly, morning, noon, and night. He once claimed, "I drink to make other people more interesting." But he was really trying to drown his demons. Depression ran deep, and alcohol became his only shield. By his 60s, his health was failing. He was paranoid, forgetful, and barely writing. In 1961, he shot himself in his Idaho home. He was 61 and full of scars no one could see. And from one writer to another, our next name had a different rhythm, but the same tragic ending. Brian Connolly, the sweet frontman. Silenced by booze, Brian Connolly lit up the stage like a thunderbolt in a glitter storm. As the unmistakable voice behind the sweet, he helped define the glam rock sound of the 1970s. With hits like Ballroom Blitz, Fox on the Run, and Love is Like Oxygen, Connolly wasn't just a singer, he was a spectacle. Wild hair, sequins, platform boots. He gave fans a riot of color and sound every time he stepped up to the mic. But behind the flash and frenzy, a quieter struggle was brewing. Brian's battle with alcohol began early and never let go. The fame, the touring, the pressure, it all fed his drinking. And unlike some rock stars who hid it, Connolly's descent played out in full view. "The booze took everything," a bandmate later said. First his voice, then his health, then his life. His drinking began to impact his voice. The sharp, melodic tone that once soared over stadiums became strained and broken. As tensions grew within the band, Brian's role was reduced. Eventually, he was out. His solo efforts never reached the same heights. Still, he tried to push forward, even attempting comebacks in the 80s and 90s, but the damage was already done. By the time the 1990s rolled around, Brian's health was visibly in decline. Years of alcohol abuse had ravaged his liver and weakened his heart. On stage, he was a shadow of his former self, thinner, quieter, and struggling to breathe between verses. Despite moments of clarity and attempts to get clean, his body had been through too much. In 1997, Brian Connolly died at the age of 51. The official causes were kidney failure, liver failure, and multiple heart attacks. Every one of them tied back to decades of hard drinking. The rock world mourned, but many had seen it coming. The man who once shouted, "Are you ready, Steve?" before igniting a generation had been silenced, not by critics, not by obscurity, but by addiction. And as his voice faded from the stage, it lived on in vinyl grooves and glam rock anthems. An echo of a man who gave everything to the music and lost everything to the bottle. From the glitter to the gutter, his was a story too many artists would tragically share. Brendan Behan, Ireland's Drunken. Literary lion. Brendan Behan was larger than life, a playwright, poet, and one-man party. He wrote The Quare Fellow and Borstal Boy, earning fame for his wit and fierce Irish pride. But drink was always part of the act, and soon it became the act. Behan once joked, "I only drink on two occasions, when I'm thirsty and when I'm not." He made bars his second home. Interviews slurred, performances missed. It became clear his genius was slipping away. Diagnosed with diabetes, doctors warned him to stop drinking. He didn't. In 1964, he collapsed and died at just 41. His funeral was massive. His spirit even bigger. But alcohol cut short a voice that still had volumes left to say.